What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to Hockeytalk Nation with me, your host Dan, and my special guest tonight. You all know him and y'all remember him. He is from Locked On Wild. It is Seth. Welcome back, Seth.
Hey, thanks for having me back. As the audience can probably tell, I'm fighting it. So we're gonna just soldier through, and we're gonna have a great show. And happy to be here.
That we are. I know what you've been going through. I went through it. We didn't have a live last week because I was not feeling well. So we all been there, and we can definitely relate with you.
Yeah, it's not fun, but it is what it is.
Definitely. Let's just give a quick shout out to everyone who's popping in the chat with us today. We have Matthew Pitsley. What's going on, Matthew? We have Robert Pop Springs. They like to call me Sami Zayn because we're not in the same room. And they got this conspiracy theory that I'm Sami Zayn. So we run with it. We got Dig It in the house. What's going on, Dig? We have... saw a bunch more other people pop in here. We have Budget Rips. Thanks for coming, Budget. We have Zach's Collections in the house. We have Goza, everyone's other favorite Rangers fan from across the pond, who likes to talk crap about everybody else's team, but you should be talking crap about our team, Goza. But yeah, that's all we got so far. We'll give a shout out to everyone else who keeps popping in. We appreciate you guys being here tonight. And as always, let's just dive right in. Let's give a quick shout out to our channel sponsor. And remember, go check out Tsunami Sportscards if you're looking for anything that you collect for your PC player or a team you're collecting. Go check them out. Use the code DMHockey88 for 25% off your first order. So that's hockey code DMHockey88 for 25% off your first order. And check them out also on Whatnot now. So definitely check out Kai. We're going to have him on again here soon. So let's dive right into our next slide. And that is our Kitchener Ranger draft watch. The three players we were watching right up until the draft this year. We have Cameron Reed, who's played 59 games, 13 goals, 36 assists for 49 points. We have Tanner Lame, the right winger, who's played 58 games, 10 goals, 36 assists for 46 points. And we have Luca Romano, the center, who's played 58 games, 21 goals, 23 assists for 44 points. So we'll be checking in with these guys throughout the year and seeing how they're progressing. Hopefully we can get an update on the draft boards to see where these guys are sitting at next. Now we dive into Friday Night Hockey news. So Seth, chat, could we see the Shen brothers reunite at the deadline for both of their 1,000 games being on the same team?
I mean, I wouldn't certainly rule it out because the if the Vegas Golden Knights are anything, it's active. And I know Luke with the Predators made the bold comments this week that he's never been on a team that has struggled to score as much as the Nashville Predators have this season. And I would imagine that Barry Trott's not too happy about that type of comment to the media. So I guess we'll wait and see. Well, we're only a little over a week until, or actually, I think the trade deadline is a week from today. So
yeah,
we've got a week until the trade deadline. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if we see some big moves made by some of the contending teams, and Nashville's definitely not one of them.
Definitely. It'd be great to see. I know I have a feeling that we're going to see one of the Shen brothers back in Toronto because it seems like a Berube type player. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see one of the Shens, either Braden or Luke, back in Toronto.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly that certainly feels like a destined spot for sure. It's just, it's always hard because the big thing you got to look at is how teams are doing like right as the trade deadline is going on? Like, are they playing their best or are they starting to tail off? Then that might be the difference between a player going to one spot or going somewhere else.
Definitely. Next up, we have Trent Frederick out week to week with a lower body injury. So that hurts the Boston team there that's already been struggling.
Yeah, they have been reeling this year. I don't know what they're going to do in the offseason because it does feel like they need to make some major splashes, but they don't have a ton of room to be able to do that. So how are they going to fix a pretty flawed roster? I don't know if they even know what they need to do to fix it.
They have a lot of the big names rumored out there right now, like Marchand's out there because this is his last part of his deal, so he's looking for a new deal.
Yeah, they're gonna have some money they have to shell out, and they need way more depth. Their depth has taken a big hit, so you got to have some money to be able to fill that out as well.
And I don't think Korpisalo trading for him helped them any in the long run either.
Yeah, that was a gamble, but it was definitely not a gamble that they won.
Yeah. And then we have Michael Bunting is out indefinitely after appendix surgery. This just came out of the blue too.
Yeah, and that again, you want to talk about a team that is a mess. The Pittsburgh Penguins are a mess too. And they're in kind of a weird spot because you're playing through the final few years of Sidney Crosby's career, so obviously you're gonna be going all in regardless of if you really feel like you can or not. So that's another roster that's going to need some major help once the offseason gets here.
I wonder if Pittsburgh thought it was going to be like how Ovechkin and the Washington Capitals are. I think if that's how they saw the pitcher going, but it's going totally different there.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what they were hoping would happen, but it hasn't come close to that. They're one of the worst defensive teams in the entire NHL, and that's not something that's going to get fixed overnight.
No. Then we have Brock Besser on the trade block. That's another huge piece in Vancouver that could be going.
And this is one that I'd like to see the Wilds take a peek at because obviously with their injuries recently, they may have some money freed up to be able to bring somebody on the books for the rest of the year. And I think Besser could certainly be somebody that helps them. Will they go that route though? Because you're going to have to pay a pretty penny to get him. That remains to be seen.
And that's going to be coming up later because I have a question on that for you as well. And then we have the OV goal tracker at 895 right now. So he's slowly creeping up there.
I think the expectation is that the next time the Minnesota Wild play the Washington Capitals, they'll be hosting them at the X. I think the expectation is that it's going to happen that game, of course.
I was told he doesn't want it to be an empty net goal.
Yeah, I don't blame him for that. It's going to be fitting if it's a power play goal.
Definitely. That's how he started. So it'd be great to see how he finished with that as well. Then this is a hurtful one to the Rangers even more. And that just diminished any playoff hopes that they had. And that's Adam Fox is on the IR. Expected to return later, but not soon enough.
Yeah, that's a tough blow for a Rangers team that has they have had all sorts of things go wrong so far this season, and he's one of their top defensemen, and that's not something that you can just plug anybody in to be able to fix. That's going to be a loss that they definitely will feel going forward.
Definitely. That's going to hurt them a lot. Still didn't like the pickup of JT Miller, though. I still feel we gave up on Philip Hedl, who was going to be at least, if Zibanejad left, at least a top-line center for right now, but definitely top two.
Yeah, I can understand the Rangers' thinking was we kind of have no choice with the roster we have to continue to go for this. So let's at least go get a guy that's, is a very capable NHL guy. And I think it's pretty obvious at this point that Elias Pettersson was all the issues that were going on in Vancouver. Because JT Miller's been just fine since he went to New York.
Yeah. And then while we're on the Pettersson, and I don't think Vancouver's done. I think they're going to deal him.
I hope they do.
I really do.
I would like to see one less team that the Wild have to contend with down the stretch for that wild card spot.
Definitely. And then a little bit of Oilers and Wild news. The Oilers claim Travis Dermott from the Wild. So he's back with the Oilers again.
That was an interesting situation, but I always felt like Dermott was more of just a rental type player until Jonas Brodin came back. And with all the injuries that have taken place with the Minnesota Wild forwards this year, they need as much extra help in the forward department as they can get. And so it came down to a waiver claim, and it was either Dermott or Devon Shore, I think. And they just at that point were like, we got to keep the forward. So he played fine when he played, but he just was always kind of a 7th or 8th defenseman until Jonas Brodin came back, and then that was really all they needed him for.
Yeah. And then this is the big news. Seth Jones wants out of Chicago. It was very clear in his interview after the game he does not want to be there.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting situation, because how much of his play is attributed to Chicago being a bad team, and how much of it is him himself. If he goes to a contender, is he going to turn into like a bona fide top 4 defenseman, or is he going to be the same guy he's been since he came to Chicago? Like, I guess won't really know until he would get traded, but the big obstacle there is going to be that contract.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, it's still Seth Jones, who'd be a great defenseman for any team. So I'm sure there'll be somebody knocking on the door to try and get him.
Oh yeah, there'll be somebody that'll knock. There's no obstacle for contracts in the NHL anymore. Teams take on bad contracts all the time.
There might even be a third team in there to kind of take some money as well for a pick like San Jose or someone like that.
Yeah, most definitely. You see those broker type deals quite a bit. I mean, with the 2 contracts we've seen Anaheim take on this year, and I know we're going to talk about another one here in a little bit. There are always teams that are just willing to take on money, regardless of if it's good or bad. So there'll certainly be some takers. Yeah.
Next we have, which is surprising after the showing in the Four Nations Cup, Jordan Binnington's on the trade block.
Yeah, this one I can understand why, I guess, because it's pretty clear that Jim Montgomery wants a different style of team than what the St. Louis Blues currently are, and he, I think, just wants to have way more say in how the roster is constructed. Binnington has always been a guy who is great when things are going well, but when things are going bad, he's not good. He tends to lose in pretty epic fashion. So that one surprises me a little bit, but it doesn't surprise me as much.
Well, where are we thinking if he would end up? Where do you think he might end up?
That's a good question. I would say that the preference for the Blues would be to send him out east, so you don't trade him within the division, because he would be somebody that could certainly be pretty motivated to beat his former team if he does get traded. Don't count the Buffalo Sabres out of a Binnington trade. Their goalie situation has been kind of a enigma for them for a while. So don't be surprised if maybe the Sabres come knocking, or another one, the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah,
with the Craig Berube connection.
yeah, that would be a good one as well. Next question, or next news here tonight is Shane Wright is a legit top 6 NHL forward now. I think all the years spent in the AHL has really helped develop him, and I think it's going to pay off for the Kraken here sooner than later.
Yeah, they desperately need it too. Like they do not have a wealth of players that can fit in that top 6 capacity. So if they can get anybody that can take some of those minutes and can give them a little something, that's a huge lift for a team that just really at this point, they're just in need of anything they can get, whether it be players that can look the part, players that can score. Honestly, you just need some guys to start kind of carrying their weight, so to speak.
And one person that you haven't even heard of for a while, and that's Matty Beniers. That was their golden child, and haven't heard anything about him.
Yeah, he is in the midst of a pretty bad season, from what I've heard.
Definitely. And then our next bit is Ducks get Ville Husso from the Red Wings. So the Ducks are stockpiling some more goalies there, it seems.
From from what I gather, from what I have seen on social media, there is some steam that a John Gibson trade is either close to complete or is in the works. So I don't know if it's going to be to Detroit necessarily, but I wouldn't. I guess I wouldn't look past it. They certainly could use a little more goaltending. Cam Talbot's been good, but he's like 38 at this point. You're going to need somebody else just as insurance.
Definitely. And then I kind of took off by this trade because they have Dossidle, who seems to be the future there. So Ville Husso is not going to want to be a backup because he was a starter for Detroit. So I don't understand this trade a little bit.
Well, it's to create some salary cap room for Detroit to make a swing, because they've kind of vaulted themselves into that wild card 1 spot, and I think it seems more and more likely that they're going to make the playoffs. So they're just looking to provide a little flexibility to be able to go out and get somebody at the deadline, and Anaheim has never met a contract that they didn't like. So they're like, well, yeah, we'll definitely take Ville Husso. We don't need a goalie at all, but why not?
Definitely. Shout out to a couple new people who came in here. Dewey, thanks for coming, and Maiden's World of Wax, thanks for popping in. We appreciate you guys being here. Thanks for joining me and Seth. So yeah, that's a little bit about our news. Before we go on to the next one, what did you think of the Four Nations?
I thought it was terrific. I just loved the intensity. I loved how much the players really matched the hype of the moment. Like the whole reason that this Four Nations face-off became a thing was because people were falling further and further out of favor with the All-Star game. And for it to feel like a game 7 of the Stanley Cup final every game, that was very well done by the NHL, and I know the ratings were through the roof. So Definitely. It doesn't surprise me at all that that fans enjoyed this, because the All-Star game has set a pretty low bar as far as entertainment goes. So the fact that they exceeded it in the way that they did, I think, was super impressive. And I'm looking forward to maybe not necessarily the Four Nations face-off going forward, but more of this international type competition to put nations against each other, because I think that's when the real intensity shines, from especially between U.S. and Canada. Like they very clearly do not like each other when they're wearing their colors.
And I think the players love this a lot more. You could see the intensity each game, each time they stepped on, you could tell from the get-go, right from the first drop of the puck from the first game, you could tell.
Yeah, like they were ready to rock from the moment the first game began. I think people were a little hesitant of this type of thing, just because we didn't know what to expect if the players were going to take it seriously. And when they did, it was like, okay, we can get in on this. This could be fun. And boy, was it ever.
Yes, it was. To see the two Tkachuk brothers play together when they've never played together, it was just, I know I've seen a lot of memes of the Hanson brothers with the Tkachuk brothers' faces on it. Like,
oh yeah,
it was great.
Yeah, I think that was the highlight of the tournament. And it's a shame that those guys got hurt at the end of the tournament, because I think if they were healthy, I think USA would have won.
Definitely. I thought coming into this, I was hands down, the U.S. has the best goalie tandem. Canada, I was iffy on Canada's goalie, and I still am. But I mean, he pulled it out. It was a gut effort from Binnington at that overtime. Like, some of those shots were guaranteed money goals, and I don't know how he got them.
Yeah.
But and then to see McDavid get his moment, I think that's going to lift him a little bit more too.
Yeah, and it was I had said, I think I did a little bit of a pregame for the championship game for Locked On Wild, and I had said the only way that Canada is going to win this is if Jordan Binnington outduels Connor Hellebuck, and he did. He did in OT. I don't know how he kept those goals out, like you said, but that was what Canada needed. That was what Canada got, and that's why they ended up winning the tournament.
Definitely. Yeah, it was a fun little thing. And then we're getting the Olympics, I think they announced. Yeah. So that's going to be even more fun to see this rivalry grow a little bit more. And I'm really hoping that we get the best on best, and that includes Russia and Germany, because there's a lot of players that deserve to be there that weren't.
Yeah, and I think we're working towards that. Now, when will that happen, I guess, is anybody's guess, but I think that's the plan, is to have as many of the best players throughout the sport be involved as they possibly can.
Definitely. On to our next slide here. Once it loads up here. And that is our YouTube community shout out. So here's 5 great channels for you guys to go check out. I can't recommend them enough. We have Locked On Wild with our guest today, Seth. So go check him out. His link is in the chat there, so you can click it, go sub him up, give him a like. We have the OHL podcast, a good friend of ours, Mike Farwell, who runs that. Great show over there. Go check that out. We have ARC Sportscards. Go check him out. He does a lot of reviews. Great show over there. And then we have Callie and Jordan Squad, the commish. Go check them out. Always great times over there. Always got some good shorts, some great giveaways. And we have Freedom Sufferer of Cards. Go check them out. Good friend Julie Farnham's, and great guy as well. Go check him out. These are 5 great channels. Go check them out. Then on to our next one, and this is our guest spotlight, and this is all about Seth and Locked On Wild. I have his stuff here for anyone who doesn't have YouTube and you want to check him out. There's the Locked On podcast with his Instagram link, and his Facebook link. So go check him out. Always great time when Seth's on, and always great time when you can get over in one of his live chats with Denny too. That's fun there when Denny's on. You never know what you're going to get with Denny.
No, you do not.
Hey, shout out to Aaron, Sportscards and things, and Callie for popping in. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for coming in. So, Seth, what's new with you and Locked On Wild?
Not a lot. Just gearing up for the trade deadline next week, and just trying to figure out what the heck is going on with this Minnesota Wild team this year. Like, road games have been really not a problem, but good luck getting a win at home. I've never seen anything like this. Like, it is about as bizarre a world of a season as you could get, and I just like they really cannot kill penalties, but every time they get counted out, it seems like they find a way to pick up a big win. So I'm enjoying the ride, but I also am kind of scratching my head along the way. Like, how are we doing this? How does this team continue to find ways to win games?
Yeah, definitely. So I got a couple questions here, a couple from the people who aren't here tonight, and a couple from me. And anybody in the chat, if you guys have some questions, drop them. Seth will answer them. No problem for you guys. But the first question I got is, what trades could we see the Wild make?
Well, I think now that we've seen a couple of updates to the timetables for key players, I think we could see the Wild be more active at the deadline. Obviously, they've kind of been in wait-and-see mode with Kirill Kaprizov, because if there's a chance that he can come back before the regular season is done, you need to have him available. But I'm at the point where, like, I was kind of reevaluating everything when Joel Eriksson got hurt, and 6 weeks from the time that Joel Eriksson got hurt left you with 4 games left in the regular season. So we're getting up to the point of the year where it might just make sense to hold those two out at least until the start of the postseason. And if they can come back and help you out, that's great. But I think if you have money then available to go out and get somebody that can actually like physically help you, I think you got to go do it. And the best way to help this team out would be to go get a top 6 player that could get you a couple goals here and there. And obviously the one that has been most linked to the Minnesota Wild has been Brock Nelson all season. I just don't get the sense that the Islanders are in that mode yet. And so I'm kind of shifting my sights toward Brock Besser, because that seems like one that is more feasible, because it seems like Vancouver is starting to lose steam. And, if they fall out of the playoff picture and they don't feel like they can legitimately contend, it makes all the sense in the world for them to deal him and try to get something so they don't just lose him for free. So if it were me, if I were Bill Guerin, I would go that route and bring him in at the least for the stretch run. And then you make every attempt you can to re-sign him after the season is done. But I think that's the route I would go. Now, will they do that? I guess we'll have to wait and see. But it does feel like this Wild team is going to need to make some sort of a move if they're going to continue to fight it out in this playoff picture.
We got a question here, saying from Callie and Jordan Squad, was this not the story of the Kings team that finished 8 wins, finished 8th and won the Stanley Cup and could not win at home?
Boy, if that's the path the Minnesota Wild follow this year, I'm not going to complain one bit. That would be a lot of fun.
All right, our next question. This came in from a good friend of the show, Julie Farnham, who's a huge Wild fan. She can't be here tonight, but I know she'll watch on the replay. But are the Wild trying to get Larkin from Detroit?
I certainly could have seen that being in play if Detroit would not have recovered from the early start of the season that they had. Obviously, they have rebounded considerably. And I think the showing that Larkin had in the Four Nations face-off is probably going to further reinforce him as a core type player for the Red Wings moving forward. So I think had they been floundering through this season like they were in the beginning, maybe that's a conversation you have. But now that they've righted the ship and they're in a playoff picture, I think he's pretty squarely off limits for Detroit right now.
Then her next question, which we've been touching on, and that is, are they going to try and get Brock Besser as well from Vancouver?
Yeah, I think that's probably the leader in the clubhouse right now. If they're going to make an impact sort of a trade. Now, it is entirely possible that the Wild make some sort of a trade that is a like minor trade, to address a key area such as, I don't know, maybe the penalty kill. It'd be nice to have somebody that could actually kill a penalty on this team. But if they're going to make a big splash, I think the route that they go is probably Brock Besser to help shore up that top six.
Then one that I saw that I thought would really do well in Minnesota and a good change of scenery, and that's Dylan Cousins for a fit for the Wild.
That's an interesting one too, because he's a young center, and the Minnesota Wild could certainly use some additional center depth. The thing with him is I'm just don't really know, because I haven't watched him a ton. I don't know if he is like having just a bit of a slump because of the situation that Buffalo is in, or if it's a decline himself. Like you can't really tell if it's the player or if it's the team.
Yeah.
If it's the team that is leading to him not having as good of a season, that's one thing. But if it's him that is kind of starting to struggle, then maybe I'm a little more leery to do something like that.
Dig had a question. Who would the Wild have to give up in a trade?
If it was going to be like for Besser? We can use that as an example.
Yeah.
I think if the Wild are going to go get a guy like Brock Besser, it's going to have to be a top prospect and a high pick. I think, you always hear like a pick and a prospect. So the Wild do not have a first-round pick next year. So that limits them a little bit. But you could, in theory, offer up a higher prospect with like a second-round pick attached in order to make that work, or multiple prospects. I think it's going to be something along those lines. Now, the Canucks may say, well, we want an NHL-ready player, in which case maybe the Wild look at one of their young defensemen, like a Carson Lambos or somebody like that, because the Wild's D-core is pretty full at the moment. So they could deal from their defensive depth as a position of strength to make a deal happen. I would say that it would probably take like a young NHL-ready player, a pick, and maybe a prospect to make Brock Besser happen. And if that's the case, that's a price I'm certainly willing to part with to do that.
Awesome. Another fit I could see, or rumor I saw, was Trent Frederick to the Wild for insurance for Ryan Hartman.
Yeah, I'm of the mind that I would rather see the Wild try to acquire a little more skill and speed, as opposed to that brute force physicality type stuff. I think they have enough of that with guys like Marcus Foligno, Yakov Trenin, Jake Middleton, Zach Bogosian. I think they have enough players that can play that role, but we're really seeing, as this year unfolds, the lack of like separator type scoring depth that this team just really doesn't have. The teams like Dallas, Colorado, they've got it. Winnipeg's got it. And if you're gonna get to a point where you're gonna be competing with those teams on a nightly basis, you got to find a way to make that happen. So I would probably say no from a Trent Frederick perspective, but I could certainly see that being something that Bill Guerin might be interested in to try to help kind of further the Wild's identity.
Definitely. And then I got another question here from Dig, who asked me off camera. And what are the expectations / predictions for Hartman with regards to the rest of the season?
Well, I think there are going to be a lot of eyes on him. If he continues to if he does any more of this sort of thing, you can only really tolerate a player that's not producing for so long. And if he continues to go the rest of the season without putting points on the board and putting the team in bad positions, having to kill off penalties, there may be an instance in which he gets moved in the off season. Excuse me. They're going to need him to, especially with Kaprizov and Eriksson Ek out, they're going to need him to fill a top 6 role. And in order to do that, you got to be able to give the team points and to score some goals. So we've got 20-ish games left between now and the end of the regular season. I'd like to see Hartman get, when he comes back, I'd like to see him get, 8 or 9 goals in that span to really help with that top 6 scoring. Because if not him, I don't really know who else they turn to unless they go out and make a major trade.
Definitely. And Callie said the hardest part of these trades is no first round pick.
Yeah, that's going to be a big factor. And I like I like what the Wild did with their first round pick by going out and trading for David Juracek. I think that's something that's really going to help them out, especially on defense going forward. They have built a pretty nice little decor and a contingency plan for once Jared Spurgeon and Jonas Brodin are in the part of their career where you either have to put them in a reduced role or move them elsewhere. I think they're really equipped to be able to do that and not suffer for it.
Definitely.
So I'm totally fine with the Wild giving up their first round pick for a guy like that. It just means that if you're going to do any sort of an acquisition, that you're going to have to get creative and find other ways to make it worthwhile for the other team.
Definitely. So should the Wild be worried without Krill and Eriksson Ek, you think?
I don't know if they should be. This is pretty much what I expected this team would look like without Kirill, struggling to score, because he plays such a huge part in what makes this team tick. And if you remove him from the equation, it's really hard to overcome that. So yeah. I'm not super surprised. Honestly, I would say I'm more pleasantly surprised than anything that they've been able to at least hold their own. All you can hope for is that he is ready to come back once the playoffs get started, because if not, then yeah, there's going to be major concerns there. And even going to like a beyond this year level, like I'm not super worried about him re-signing and anything like that. I think he likes it here enough that I think staying in Minnesota is probably the top. That's the leader in the clubhouse for what's going to happen. So I'm not super worried about that. But, I look at some of the other players on this roster and I'm like, somebody else is going to have to do a little something, or it's going to be a quick postseason once again if they don't get anybody else that helps in the scoring department. Because we've seen Kirill go nuts in the playoffs. He did a couple years ago against the St. Louis Blues. Nobody else on the roster did any scoring, and the Wild were done after the first round. So yeah. It's all about what everybody else is doing. If he gets a few games to kind of get himself back in shape, I think he'll be just fine.
Christopher Works had a question. What do you think they are going to do in goal next year?
Well, I think the plan is going to be Philip Gustafsson and Jesper Wallstedt will split the nets. Now, obviously, Jesper hasn't had a ton of playing experience as of yet, but I'm not really super worried about him at this point, to be honest. It's not a great Iowa team that is playing in front of him. And I think once he gets to the NHL level, he's got a much better defense in front of him. And I think he's going to have a far easier time kind of figuring out what works and what doesn't. When you're being thrown in like a spot start type situation, there's obviously a lot of other variables that come into play. Consistent starts at the NHL level, that's going to be where he starts to really kind of get his feet wet and become an impact type goalie for this team.
Yeah, definitely. He's going to be their number one going throughout too. He just needs to get those NHL reps. But like you said, he'll have the defense in front of him that he doesn't have in Iowa either.
You're right. And he's, they're going to be able to help him out considerably. And I think learning on the go is going to give him a big confidence boost too, that I think is going to help speed up his development as well.
Definitely. Next question, we touched a little bit about this too, but would Brock Nelson be a fit in Minnesota? I know he's a little bit on the older side, but he will bring in that secondary scoring.
I think he would definitely be a fit. He is good on the penalty kill. He's great in the face-off circle. Those are two areas that I think the Wild need a lot of help in. So I think he would certainly help out there. Again, I'm starting to think that the Islanders are kind of holding this up themselves, as opposed to Minnesota maybe getting cold feet to make a trade. I think it's the Islanders more so saying, we don't know if we're ready to sell at this point. I think he would definitely be a fit. It's just gonna come down to if the Wild are willing to wait, or if the Islanders just say, nah, I think we're too close in this fight to where I think we're just gonna stick with it and see if we can kind of dig ourselves out.
Yeah, because Bill Guerin would have got a first-hand view of him since he put Team USA together, so he knows what kind of player he would get in Brock Besser or Brock Nelson.
For sure. So it depends entirely on what the Islanders do over the course of this next week.
Yeah, definitely. Next question is, how did the Wild build a top prospect pool without top picks?
That's a great question. And that is pretty much exclusively due to the efforts of Judd Brackett in completely retooling the scouting department and the entire draft process, which he was the draft guru in Vancouver. And for whatever reason, things just didn't work out there. He ended up being shown the door, and Bill Guerin said, we want you to come in and run the draft, and it'll be your thing entirely. You tell me who you want to draft, and we'll make it happen. And the Wild have just done such a good job of turning those late first-round picks into quality picks. I think we look at I want to say it's now I want to say it's like 8 first-round picks that Judd Brackett has made. And now that Charlie Stramel has started to really pick it up at Michigan State, all 8 of them look like solid hits. And you're even look at some of the like second-round picks, like Riley Height looks like a fantastic selection. They've done such a good job of identifying kind of the type of player that they want. But not only that, they are going after really high character, high IQ players. Because, it seems like anytime you match up high IQ and skill with like the big brute force, the high IQ wins out pretty regularly, and it seems like Bill Guerin wants this to be a very high IQ team, and he's gone great lengths to try to put that type of roster together.
Yeah, no, it shows with the prospects that they picked up in the defensive cores, like the David Jiricek, who I think is going to flourish because he'll finally get the chance to play every day. And I think that's going to be huge for him, and you're going to see him take a next step here in a year or two.
Yeah, he's a guy, like, the big knock on him was that he can't skate. And the Wild have a pretty good skating coach in Andy Ness that is pretty highly regarded for the work that he does with players coming back from injuries. To the point that when I heard that, I was like, is it that he can't skate, or it's that the Columbus Blue Jackets don't really know how to work with the talent they have? And it's interesting because this was happening right as Dean Evison was taking over as head coach. So you wonder if they maybe had the opportunity to get him in that system a little bit, if Dean would have wanted to keep him. But I'm perfectly fine with poaching good talent and putting it in a position to succeed. And it certainly seems like Jiricek is in a real good spot with this Wild organization.
Definitely. The next question I got for you is, how should the Wild approach the upcoming draft?
Well, I think they because I from what I've heard, it's not as great of a draft as it's been in the last few years. So I think the Wild have already kind of done some of this by trading their first-round pick to go get David Jiricek and saying, well, we'd rather have a sure thing than we would have a prospect or a project that's going to take, 5-6 years to get going. As far as the rest of the draft goes, I default to taking skill players to add to the mix. I think defense is in pretty good shape for a while. So I would probably lean heavily towards offensive skill players. I'd probably put, like the NFL draft, I'd probably put high emphasis on a center and finish with some speed and some skill on the wings. And sprinkle in a little defense too, but I think the big thing that I want to see the team continue to try to stack is the skill positions going forward.
Now, do you think that would change if they did like a splash in the trade deadline? So if they acquire, like, a Dylan Cousins or a Brock Besser, do you think their philosophy would change a bit?
I think so. I think they may, view that box as being checked, but I do like to see, because not every pick that you draft is going to end up even really being a factor on your team. A lot of times you are drafting players that their biggest contribution may be that they help bring in a player that more fits what you're trying to do at that particular moment. So I just would like to see them continue to just, try to give themselves options. Like, okay, the center position is kind of up in the air a little bit. So go grab somebody that can maybe factor into that in a couple of years. The nice thing is that it doesn't feel like there are any pressing needs that they don't have or have the ability to go get. Like, oh no, we don't have any goalie prospects in our system, so we gotta go get somebody. Like, that would be a real bad spot to be. But it's mostly just at this point, like, just continuing to add pieces that could either factor in or could help bring something else in to get you a little closer to where you're trying to go.
So I know you're talking about, like, the penalty kill. What if they would try to go get a two-way center that could kill the penalties for them? Like, try and get that homegrown talent so that could fix their problems.
Yeah, I think definitely a two-way center is a good spot to look. I think they have. I think the Wild right now have almost too many of those types of guys, like the bottom six guys. It's one thing to have players that you think are more top six playing middle six roles than it is to have guys that are clear-cut bottom six players playing in top six roles. Like, I think the Wild are definitely number two there, where they have a bunch of bottom six guys that are a little too far elevated. And so if they can find some players that are clear-cut top six players, that'll help sort that lineup out a little bit.
Definitely. My next question for you was, who is a dark horse you could see the Wild sneaking and grabbing in the trade deadline?
Well, I put this together purely for fun, but I did an episode early on in the season when I think the Buffalo Sabres had lost 13 games in a row. I said, why don't you go out and get Tage Thompson? I would be super in favor of that. I think Buffalo is still pretty bad, but I don't know at what point, because there is, like, the reason I did this was because there's some history here. Like, the Sabres have traded away some top tier talent because they haven't been able to win with them. Jack Eichel for one, and I think Sam Reinhart was the other. So they clearly have done it before. The problem is they continue to not win. So at some point he's going to kind of get tired of that. And, the Wild were linked to Jack Eichel when that sweepstakes was going on. So I was like, why not? Why not go try to get that guy and make him part of your process? Ultimately, I don't think it happens, but I would sure love if it did.
Now, hypothetically, if they did get Tage Thompson, that's a big name that would have to go back the other way. So would that be a Marco Rossi or?
Yeah, that would definitely be Marco Rossi. It'd probably be two other top prospects, and it would probably be a future first-round pick if you're making that happen. So it's a hefty price. I would probably still be willing to pay it, but that's a lot to give up.
And then, so the Wild, if they do say they're in the playoffs, are we going to see Marc-Andre Fleury every night? Is he their best chance?
That's a good question. I think they would probably like for Philip Gustafsson to be the guy, but he's been a little shaky here lately. And, I really hadn't thought about that too much yet this season. So I'll say this, though. I think that's definitely going to sort itself out the rest of the season. I mean, I think it still is Gustafsson as the starter and Fleury as the backup. But I think if Gustafsson continues to flounder a little bit, then I think we could definitely see Fleury get at least a couple of starts during the postseason, or maybe even be the guy that they go to try to get a little more consistency in the net.
I was just thinking where retirement, this would be Fleury's last hurrah going for the playoffs. Do you ride him, see what you get until he doesn't, or do you stick with what got you there?
Well, and the problem too is that he's been playing, like, is his season being particularly solid? Is that the byproduct of him not starting a ton? He really hasn't even gone back-to-back starts more than like a couple times this season. So I think that would be something you'd have to really get him in shape for that again, if you were going to go that route. So I would say it'll probably still be Gus, but if it were getting to be a situation where it looked like maybe it was his last start, it would not surprise me at all if they snuck Fleury in to try to get him one more.
Yeah, it'd be great to see, and then you almost would feel bad if you didn't live up to the Fleury expectations either.
Yeah, that'd be the other side of the coin too.
But no. So I know this is Krill's last year. What are we looking at for a contract for him in the off season if he gets one?
Well, I think he's going to be pushing 14, 15 a year. And I think it's funny because I don't think there's any number that I would hear and say, oh, he's not worth that, because it's one thing to be Connor I might be saying something that's going to get people turning up their volume. Say, did he really just say that? It's one thing to be Connor McDavid in Edmonton and get what he's getting while also having Leon Draisaitl on the team. It was another thing to be Nathan McKinnon and getting what he's getting while also having a Mikko Rantanen on the team up until this season. Kirill Kaprizov doesn't have that guy. Like, Matt Boldy is a solid player. Marco Rossi is a solid player. They're nowhere near the talent level that those two had on their flank. And so the numbers that Kirill is putting up by himself, if he would say 16 and a half, I'm not gonna blink, and I'm gonna say you give it to him and you don't think twice about it. I think he's that important to this franchise, and it's like when it's like the contract that Joe Mauer signed after he had his MVP season. There were a lot of people that said, oh, that's way too much money. But there were others still that said you pay a far bigger price if you don't re-sign that type of talent than you do if you do. So
yeah,
I think you just essentially write him a blank check, and you just work on building a quality team around him.
I still would love to see how he would do if he had a wingman like McDavid has Draisaitl or McKinnon has Rantanen. I would still love to see what Kirill would do if he had a good, solid wingman like McDavid or McKinnon.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting to see having that or even having a number one center, like having a bona fide number one center to work with on his line. Because he has been the unquestioned player that is carrying the line that he's on ever since he got here. So having somebody that is at equal talent level to put alongside him that'd be fun to watch for sure.
Who would be a good fit for center with them? Who would be his wingman if the Wild could go out and get someone? Who would be the perfect fit for Kirill?
Well, I think Jack Eichel would have been a pretty good compliment for him for sure, which is why I was very in favor of making that trade back when it was a possibility. I think that would have been a great fit. Tage Thompson too. He'd be all right.
Yeah, those would be two good players.
Yeah, I think they'd fit pretty good.
He almost needs a setup man because he reminds me a lot of Ovechkin. He can fire that thing. He almost needs a setup man, and a good setup man is going to be a free agent this year who maybe would be good for him too, and that's Marner.
Yeah. That would be an intriguing one as well. Kirill is such a great playmaker, and just has such a knack for setting up teammates in positions that they have no like
business
no right
to be in.
Yeah, exactly. They have no business being in these spots, and he's threading the needle anyway to set them up for goals. So a lot of the time I find myself just saying, geez, I would love if Kirill would just shoot the puck more. But I think he would be in positions to shoot the puck more if there were more capable, talent levels around him. So you get an Eichel, maybe that sets him up for 40, 50 more shots a season, which could lead to, 9, 10, 11 more goals.
Definitely. But it's food for thought, right? Food for thought.
Yes, it is.
It's all we can think. It's how we can do better. So another great one who I'd like to see, who's probably going to be on a different team come the trade deadline, and that's Chris Kreider. And I could see him going anywhere.
Yeah.
I see him fitting with Dallas right now.
I hope he doesn't go to Dallas. I don't need Dallas. I don't need Dallas getting any better than they already are.
But but no, it's about that time. I don't want to keep you anymore because I know you're not feeling well, and I know I'm still getting over this thing as well. So, as always, I want to say thank you to everyone in the chat for sticking around with me and Seth tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's always great when we can catch up with Seth from Locked On Wild and hear his thoughts on the Wild and every other thing going on in NHL. But Seth, I know you remember, and as a custom on this show, the guests close out the show every night. But just before you do, I just want to let everyone know to go check out Seth on Locked On Wild. His link is in the description. It's in the chat, and you saw it on the slides there as well. Go check him out. Give him a thumbs up, a like, and sub him up too on all the platforms there. And now, Seth, why don't you give us the closeout of the night?
Well, appreciate everybody tuning in. As always, here for another edition of Hockey Stick Talk Nation. Appreciate everybody tuning in and bearing with my voice here throughout the course of the night. But enjoy the rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend, and we'll catch you for the next one.
Later, everyone. See you in the next one. Have a good one.